Hello and welcome to the Graphic 45 YouTube channel. My name is Lynn, or LV Handcrafted here on YouTube, and today I am going to level up the pocket style card. This is from the Graphic 45 2023 Volume 7 card kit, and it is a really fun, sort of an interactive card that displays beautifully. I'm going to start off, this will be an A2 size card ultimately, actually just larger, but I'm going to start off by making an A2 size top folding portrait oriented card base. So I've cut this cardstock to 4¼ wide by 11 inches tall. Along the 11-inch edge, I scored it at 5½. Now I have a set of nested A2 size rectangle dies. So these dies are the same aspect ratio as an A2 card, so they are great for cutting your mats and layers, and they give you sort of an equal border if you are cutting your mats and layers for a A2 card. And so what I'm going to do is draw a line at the top of my card here, my card front, and it's just a smidge lower than ½ an inch. I would say, if you want to be precise, it ended up being 9/16 of an inch. Although I was just eyeballing it, so you don't have to be overly precise with this. And I did use a T-square ruler to draw a line that is going straight all the way across. Then what I'm aiming to do with my die is to just center it, especially looking for an equal margin on the left bottom and right edge of the die. And I'm going to tape this down so that it's nice and secure. That way I know it's not going to budge as I'm running this through my die cutting machine. But what I'm going to do when I die cut this is I'm not going to do a full die cut. I'm only going to partially cut through this die. And to achieve that, I am going to line up my top cutting plate so that the top line of my cutting plate lines up with the pencil line that I drew. So you need to make sure that your pencil line is going to fall below the top cutting edge of your die. And that way, all this will do when I run this through my die cutting machine is cut the left, bottom, and right edge, and that will leave this panel attached from the top. And that will create a bit of a hinge. Be sure to open up your card base so that you are only cutting through the front of your card. So this is going to be the leveled up portion of our pocket style card, where this top flap here that I've cut out, it's going to actually get transformed into an easel. And when you've die cut it, it should look a little bit something like that, where you just have this flap that is open through the front of your card. So now that we have that piece done, we're going to need an actual pull tab, something that's going to pull that front flap open. And as well, for this to be an easel, we'll need to put some score lines through that flap, the easel flap, I'll call it. So my card base I've cut from 120-pound cover weight, and my pull tab, when we get to that, that's going to be 120-pound cover weight. So you want something nice and thick and sturdy, since this will have an interactive component to it. You want to make sure, especially that pull tab, that it's nice thick cardstock so that it doesn't feel flimsy as you're pulling up this front panel. To get the score lines in to create my easel, what I want to do is get my open up my card base so that it's nice and flat, and I can actually line up the top of it against the top of my scoreboard. And when I score, the reason why I've lifted up the outer border is I only want to score the easel flap. And what I want to do is I am going to score a bit of a glue tab at the bottom. So I've given myself a 1/4 of an inch glue tab at the bottom. Then I also want to score where the die cutting ends to connect the two top points of the cutting edge. And my third score line, I'm going to aim for somewhere in the center. So ultimately, it'll look a little something like this. Measuring from the bottom of that easel slider panel, I have scored at a 1/4 of an inch, 2.5, and 4.5. That just happens to be where my lines ended up. But if you're adapting this to use dies that are in your stash, you just need a 1/4 of an inch from the bottom. At the very top, you need to connect where your two cut lines ended. And then you need a third score line somewhere in the center of the two. So it doesn't have to be exact. And if you're adapting this for a different card size, that's the methodology for determining where to put your score lines. And when you're done, you'll have something that opens where the bottommost and the topmost score lines you want to fold as a valley fold. That center score line you want to fold as a mountain fold. So you're going to have a little bit of that zigzag fold, and that's what's going to allow this to slide up, and as it slides up, it's going to create an easel that pops up and displays beautifully. So very quickly, I'm going to measure how wide this easel panel is. It happens to be that my die was a width of 3 3/8 of an inch. So when I cut my pull tab, I'm going to aim to cut it at 3 1/4 inch so that it's just a smidge more narrow than my easel flap. That way, when I go to glue this down, if it's not exactly centered or lined up, then it's not going to be that visible. It'll still be well hidden by the easel flap. So this is my 120-pound cover weight cardstock here that I'm going to cut to 5.5 tall by 3 1/4 of an inch wide. So 5.5 tall, which is the same height as my card base, and the width of it is just a smidge more narrow than my easel flap. Next, what I want to do is I actually need to cut through on the fold of my card base, and that's going to create a slit that my pull tab slider can fit through. So you just need to cut this to be just wide enough so that you can get your pull tab through there. And in my case, that happens to be 3 1/4 inch, and I'm just aiming to center it. So that is going to be where our pull tab will get hidden, and I am going to just round the corners of my pull tab just to give it a little bit of a nicer finish. And that's very similar to the original pocket style card that if you haven't already seen, you can actually grab the project inspiration sheet, which gives you all of the instructions for the original pocket style card, and just look for Volume 7 of 2023, and you can always print that. You can use whatever papers you'd like from your stash, and that way if you want to create the more simplified pocket style card, you definitely have those instructions. So now that I have the elements of my card base complete, I'm going to pick out some pattern papers. I'm using the Let's Get Artsy collection today, and I've pulled out the 8x8 pattern papers, and I'm using my card front as a bit of a preview to frame up what section of this pattern paper I want to use, because this particular print is really, really lovely. It's got that beautiful, beautiful print, but then on top of that, there are some really lovely sentiments. There are some quotes and phrases that I think are just a really nice reveal. So this panel that I've cut down is actually going to be hidden initially. And when you pull the slider up, the easel portion upwards, it's going to reveal that. And so what I want to do is actually glue this to what would normally be the inside of the card. I need to get this glued down first, because just like the original pocket style card, my card front is actually going to be glued shut. And so once that's glued shut, I'm not going to have access to the inside of the card anymore. So that's the piece that needs to go down first. Then I am going to attach my pull tab. And recall I mentioned that 1/4 inch at the bottom of the easel flap was a glue tab. Well, that's exactly where you want to put glue to attach your pull tab slider panel. You only want to put glue on that 1/4 inch, and then glue your pull tab panel to that 1/4 inch. And that's what's going to allow us to bring the easel portion of this card and slide it upwards so that it stands up and displays whatever you'd like. But the reason why I chose Let's Get Artsy is because we have these beautiful art pieces that I think would display beautifully on an easel card like this. So it's great that the cut aparts actually work out to be just the right dimensions to frame up on an A2 card. And so I've taken that piece I checked the 8x8 versions, but ultimately I went with the 12x12 sheet, because proportionally it just works better on my card. So that's one of the reasons why I like having both the 8x8 and the 12x12 collection paper pads, because sometimes, just depending on the size of your project and how you want to use the piece, because normally with a small card like an A2 card, normally I just stick to the 8x8 pattern papers, but I really want this focal image to stand out, and so the scale of the 8x8 worked better. Now I do want to cover not all of the weight of my card front, but just that outer border frame. And one thing that you might want to take into consideration is that this card has sort of two states to it. It's got, the initial state where everything is flat and closed, and then it's got the second state when you actually open it and put it on display. And so whatever pattern paper you end up choosing, you may want it to make sure that you preview it against both states, the closed state and the open state. And while the pink I felt worked really well when this is closed, because it's got those lovely pink flowers as part of the focal image that I chose, when this is open, the pattern paper that I chose to adhere to the inside of my card, it doesn't really have a lot of pink. It's got some reds in there, but it actually has more yellows than it does reds and pinks. So that's why I went with the yellow paper from the Patterns and Solids in the Let's Get Artsy collection. Now what I'm going to do is I've actually cut a panel that is larger than A2. It's actually 1/4 inch wider and 1/4 inch taller. And the reason for that is so that if I don't get the die lined up exactly perfectly, it's okay. I can always trim off at the edges. But what I want to do is transfer that line at the top where my easel is the top fold of my easel panel, and that way I can be sure to do the partial die cutting, because remember, we're framing up around the area that is bordering the easel flap. So I can't die cut fully this rectangle because it's actually attached at the top edge. And so that's why I needed to transfer that original pencil mark just by lining this up against my card front and taking where that score line is at the top and transferring it over to my pattern paper. And I'm going to again do a partial die cut through this pattern paper. So I'm just lining up my top cutting plate with my pencil mark. And recall, I cut this panel so that's larger than my card front so that I can make these just cutting little slivers to make sure that everything lines up perfectly. And so that's why I cut it a little bit larger so that I can line up the interior where the aperture is and then just trim off any excess from the outer edges. So that way I don't have to worry about getting the die cutting perfect. I can always just trim to fit. Then the last part of the front of our card is to actually attach my focal image, and I'm going to only glue it to the bottom portion of that easel stand because we want it to stand up still. And if you glued it to the entire card front, it's not going to pop up. You have to leave the top half free and not attached. And the last thing I'll do is I'm going to actually close my card front entirely. Now I'm using some foam just to give that thickness of the pull tab some space, and I'm only attaching adhesive on the left, bottom, and right of the frame. And now I decided last minute I'm going to add a bit of pink because I still love that idea of having that splash of pink. And I'll add this to the pull tab so that when you slide that open, it's also going to reveal this gorgeous pattern paper, which also has some beautiful sentiments on it as well. So here's where you could add maybe an extra message. Maybe this is where you sign your card and write a personal message. So you can always leave that blank to write your message there, because when it's closed, you're not going to be able to see that where I've put the pink cardstock. And so that would be a great place to hide your message. I've closed it, or I've added pattern paper, so I'll probably sign this card just on the back of the card. But before I wrap up, I do want to add some instructions on this pull tab so that the card recipient will know that they need to do something, which is to slide this panel up and actually pull on it to reveal even more and to make this display beautifully as an easel card. So when you open this, you can see that top panel reveals the inside, and as well, it stands up this portrait beautifully. And because the pattern papers are double-sided, when you turn this around to the back, it's got that beautiful butterfly, and as well also reveals this gorgeous pink pattern paper that coordinates perfectly. Again, you can put a hidden message there too if you'd like. And that completes my Pocket Slider Easel card. If you want to see the original project inspiration, you can just visit the Graphic 485 website, hit the inspiration tab at the top, and look for the Pocket Style card, which is volume 7, 2023, the Graphic 485 card kit. Thanks so much for joining me today, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye.